Hi kids, we're ready for our next chapter of the Boxcar Children. Today we're reading chapter 13, The Tin Box Again. The next day the children were up early. They had breakfast. They made their beds. We ought to go down to see Rita the first thing we do, said Violet. We're not very polite to her yesterday. All we could think of was Benny. Very well, said Alice, laughing. She sat down at the kitchen table. You four go to Rita's and Joe, and I will write a letter to your grandfather. So the four children went down the road. Rita came out when she saw them coming. She began at once to show Violet what to do next on the basket. This will just be a small basket, she said. You can make them as big as you want to. Here's a picture. When Violet finished her basket, Benny said, That's really pretty, Violet. You can give it to Grandfather. So I can, said Violet, very much pleased with herself. He likes things we make. Now we must pay for it, Henry. You've paid for it already, said Rita, smiling. The big boy paid me for the basket and the lesson and the trip into the woods. He really paid me too much. She looked at Benny, took hold of his hands, and said, Don't you run away again, little boy. You make too much trouble for the hermit. For the hermit, cried Jessie. It was more trouble for us. No, said Rita, shaking her head. Dave Hunter was upset. I could see he liked Benny. It was the first time he has said more than one word at a time. My father says he was a very nice young man once. He built the house you are staying in. He did? Cried Henry. Did he live there himself? Oh yes, many years ago. My father told me about it last night after you found the little boy. He said Dave went away to work and stayed a long, long time. When he came back, he was different. He stayed in his little house for about a week, and one night some mean-looking men came to see him. They had a fight, and then they went away and left Dave alone. In a few days, Dave went into the woods and built his cabin, and he stayed there ever since. He wouldn't ever talk. As the excited children started back to Old Village, Benny said, Jessie, maybe Dave Hunter is Bill. Why do you say that, young fellow? Asked Henry. Well, Bill could build houses. He built the little yellow house on Surprise Island, and he built the little house here in Old Village. Maybe you're right, said Jessie. What would we ever do without you, Benny? Let's see what Alice and Joe think. Joe and Alice had finished writing the letter to Grandfather when the children rushed in and began to tell their story. So Dave Hunter built this house, did he? Said Joe. That must have been a long time ago, for it's an old house. Joe, I have an idea, cried Henry. Look around at this house. Now, all of you pretend for a minute you're in the little yellow house on Surprise Island. He pointed around him as he went on. There's the fireplace of the little yellow house. There's the door. There's the window. Of course, said Violet, and there's the bedroom. And there's the kitchen. I guess Bill could just build one kind of house. Why, this old house is exactly the same as the little yellow house, cried Jessie. The same front door with two windows on one side and one on the other. The same chimney, too. And the same front steps, said Alice. Last night I felt as if I was sitting on the steps of the little yellow house. So that's what it was, cried Joe. I felt that way too. We sat there so many times after supper on our wedding trip. They all looked at each other. Now let's see how this was, Henry said excitedly. Bill lived here first. Then he went to work for great-grandfather Alden. Then he married Mrs. McGregor and they lived on Surprise Island where he took care of the horses. They lived in the little yellow house. That's right, said Henry. He built the little yellow house, Grandfather said, with the help of his brother. Oh, that brother Sam, cried Joe. He was not much good. I think Sam is the clue to this mystery. So do I, said Henry. Remember, Bill sold 2 racehorses and went away without giving Mr. Alden the money. Now we're getting somewhere, said Joe. That's why Bill disappeared, I bet. But why didn't he let his wife know where he was all these years? Asked Violet. He loved his wife, Margaret. I don't know, said Henry. That's the mystery. Maybe his brother wouldn't give the money back and Bill wouldn't go home without it. Then Violet said softly, Joe. What is it, said Joe. Do you suppose Bill's brother hid the money in this house? Maybe, said Joe, thinking, but it's not a yellow house. Of course he did, said Benny. That's why Bill took the rowboat that night and came up here. I bet those mean-looking men were the friends, and they were looking for the money too. Remember Rita said they had a fight? Good job, Benny, said Joe. I guess they tried to make Bill give them the money, and Bill couldn't find it himself. And there's the mystery all solved, said Alice, laughing. Well, said Henry, I'm sure now that Dave Hunter is Bill, but where's the money? Where's the tin box? Let's hunt, said Benny. What about the chimney? Not the chimney, said Henry. Bill would have found the money if it were in the chimney. I guess that's right. Not much to see, said Jessie. A chest of drawers, a few chairs, our cots. Do you think we ought to talk with the hermit, Joe? Asked Henry. No, not yet. I don't think he would talk. Well, I'm not going to sit here. Let's do something. Okay, said Henry, getting up. We can hunt for clues in the chest of drawers. There might be a secret drawer in it. Let me see, began Jessie. The chest had 3 drawers. Joe and Alice can look in one drawer. Henry and Benny can look in another. Violet and I will look in the 3rd drawer. Soon the whole family was busy. First, they took the old dusty papers out of the drawers. They tapped each drawer, hunting for a secret drawer. They found nothing but dust. Ho-hum, what shall we do now, Jessie? Oh, I'm sure I don't know, said Jessie. Everyone looked at her. You're not cross, are you, Jessie? Jessie laughed a little. Maybe I am. I did hope we would find the money in that chest of drawers, but we tapped every single drawer and there's no secret drawer. Let's go out and sit on the steps. The family went outdoors slowly, sat down on the steps. Nobody said a word. Jessie was not often cross. Pretty soon Benny said, I wonder where that toad is. I suppose he stays under the steps. Anyone have any ideas or predictions? Alice smiled at Benny, but nobody felt like answering Benny. Benny kept on. Does a toad have a house? What kind of a house does a toad live in, Jessie? Oh, Benny, I don't know. I'm so tired. You want to know everything. Why do you want to ask about toads now when we want to find a tin box? Never mind, Jessie. I'll look for it myself. The little boy got down on his hands and knees, and soon he was lying on the ground looking under the stairs with one eye. I could see that toad. He's sitting there. He just winked at me. Benny picked up a long stick. Oh, don't hurt the toad, Benny, said Joe. Oh, no, I'm just going to see how big his room is. Benny began to move the stick from one side to the other. Then he crawled quietly to the back of the steps where there was a big hole under the house. The toad jumped through the hole and Benny followed him. Look at that. Do you see that? Look. The toad jumped through the hole and Benny followed him. Everyone had to smile. They knew Benny was crawling under the house. Soon they heard him talking to himself. Here's a pretty white stone and an old tin can, a screwdriver, not a bad screwdriver. Then he was silent. The others could hear him crawling around under the house. Never mind, Jessie, said Joe with a smile. He's having fun. Children forget things very soon, you know. Then they heard Benny say, well, here's the toad. Hello, Toad. Where do you live? He seems to be having quite a talk with that toad, said Henry, laughing. Benny went on, do you live in that old wooden box under the house? That's funny. It's open in the back instead of the front. Do you go in the back door? Why do you do that, Mr. Toad? Well, Henry! There's a tin box! What? Shouted Henry, almost falling down the stairs. I found it! A tin box sitting right in a wooden box. The whole family was down on the grass looking under the stairs. You come out, Benny. Bring the box. We better see it. Come on, bring it out here. I was coming out anyway. He came crawling as fast as he could through the hole. He pushed the tin box ahead of him. He came out from under the steps. Sure enough, cried Jessie. It is a tin box. I can hardly believe it. Now I only hope there's something in it. There is, said Benny. I shook it. The excited children sat back and looked at him. You open it, Henry. You open it. It's too hard for me to open. Henry's hands shook as he pulled the box open. There before his eyes were piles of green bills. $dollar bills, whispered Benny. No, Benny, they're $100 bills, said Henry, and I've never seen one before. Let's count them. You count, Benny. You found them, said Jessie in a kind voice. Well, Benny was so excited he could hardly count straight. At last he said, that's 40, and that's all. How much is 40 $100 bills, Henry? Do you know? 40 $100 bills. So 40 piles of 100. $4,000, young fellow, said Henry. Isn't that what the 2 racehorses would be worth, Joe? Just about, said Joe. Boy, oh boy, cried Benny. He was all tired out with excitement. They all looked at each other, then they looked at the tin box and the pile of green bills. Well, Joe, said Henry, where do we go from here? I think, answered Joe, that when we get rested, we better go see the hermit. The hermit is Dave Hunter, and Dave Hunter is Bill. Yeah, I think so too, said Benny. But even now, maybe he won't talk, said Joe. Jessie put her arm around her little brother. I'm awfully sorry I was cross with you, Benny. It's lucky you do whatever you want to do, you know, because if you hadn't looked in that toad's house, we would never have found the tin box. There's the tin box with all the money in it. Can you imagine finding a box with $4,000? My goodness. And I thought Benny was pretty brave to crawl under that house. So I'll see you next time for chapter 14. It's called The Hermit. So think about what we'll be doing in that chapter.